Emily Johnson, a 16-year-old girl in a Boston suburb, grows up in a family where her younger brother Jason is favored and celebrated, while she is ignored and dismissed despite her writing talent. After years of invisibility, Emily's frustration boils over when her parents skip her poetry competition to attend Jason's game. She turns her anger into determination, secretly writing powerful spoken word poems. Encouraged by her teacher, Emily auditions for a major poetry program and rises to a national stage. Jason supports her quietly, and their bond strengthens as he too begins questioning their parents' favoritism. At the National Festival Finals in New York, Emily delivers a searing poem exposing her parents' neglect, forcing them to face public humiliation as the audience roars in ovation. Before I dive into this story, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want more stories about finding strength when you need it most. The Johnson family lived in a quiet suburb of Boston in a neat two-story house with pale blue siding and black shutters that never quite closed properly. At first glance, they were the portrait of stability: a hardworking father, a tidy mother, a son, and a daughter. Neighbors admired the manicured lawn, the tasteful seasonal wreaths on the front door, and the aroma of fresh pies wafting from the open windows on weekends. Inside, however, cracks ran beneath that polished surface. Emily Johnson, age 16, had long learned that silence was safer than speaking. Her father, Richard, a tax accountant known for his stern precision, didn't tolerate questions. Her mother, Susan, a woman always wrapped in schedules and social appearances, loved efficiency more than tenderness. But beneath their rules, attention, and praise, there was a clear imbalance. Emily's younger brother Jason basked in parental light, while Emily remained in perpetual shadow. Jason, only 13, was constantly celebrated. When he played baseball, her parents filled the bleachers with clapping and cheers. When he scribbled half-finished poems, they marveled as though he had stitched great literature from thin air. Emily, on the other hand, was invisible. She loved writing too, but when she tried to show her stories to her parents, they skimmed them with absent-minded nods before turning back to Jason's antics. A recent example haunted her. At the school's talent show, she had stood under blinding lights performing her spoken word poem, heart-hammering, only to glance toward the audience and find her parents' seats empty. They had been in the school gymnasium, cheering Jason's basketball practice instead. That absence burned her chest with shame and fury. Her teachers praised her brilliance, but at home, the silence after each achievement grew heavier. Emily had stopped seeking approval. Instead, she began collecting her notebooks like hidden treasures. She wrote late at night, curled under her blanket with a flashlight. Her words bled with anger, longing, and a fragile determination. If her family wouldn't see her, then one day the whole world would. It was early summer when the simmering tension finally reached its first crack. Their living room was cluttered with star-shaped balloons, celebrating Jason's middle school graduation. Richard had organized a family dinner in his honor, complete with catered trays from their favorite Italian restaurant. Emily sat at the table, her fork scraping idly against the plate as the conversation bloomed entirely around Jason. "So, Jason, we'll sign you up for that baseball summer camp," Richard announced proudly, patting his son's shoulder. "If you keep this up, varsity will be no problem when you hit high school." Jason grinned, basking in the praise. "And what about me?" Emily asked suddenly. Her voice was low, but steady, like the moment before glass shatters. The table fell quiet for a second. Susan chuckled lightly, as if brushing off a minor disturbance. "Emily, sweetheart, you've always got your writing. That's nice for you, isn't it?" "Nice for me?" Emily pressed, her brown eyes locked onto her mother's. "I just won the state poetry competition. Do you even know that?" Her words hung in the air. Jason looked down at his plate, uncomfortable. Richard shifted uneasily, but said nothing. "You didn't even come," Emily whispered, her voice breaking.
I stood in front of a packed auditorium, holding my award, and you weren't there. You never are. Susan tried to intervene with her sing-song tone. Emily, we're sorry, but Jason had a baseball game. Always Jason's games. Always his life. I'm not invisible. I'm not just going to keep clapping from the sidelines while you pretend I don't exist.
The fury in her words silenced the room. For years she had swallowed her resentment, but tonight it ignited into something sharper: resolve. She excused herself, chair scraping against the tile, and stormed upstairs without another word. That night, Emily opened her notebook and began writing a new kind of piece, her hand almost trembling as the words tore out of her soul. This wasn't poetry for competitions or essays for school. It was a manifesto, a declaration that one day she would stand on a stage so large, so undeniable, that even her parents couldn't ignore her. For the first time, Emily wasn't writing to please anyone. She was writing to fight back. The days after the explosive dinner passed in a blur of silence. Richard avoided eye contact whenever Emily entered the room. Susan busied herself in her garden, pretending nothing had happened. Jason, awkward and fidgety, tried to talk with his sister, but Emily brushed him off sharply. Every night, Emily worked on her writing. The notebook was her battlefield, its pages filled with words that scorched away the suffocation she felt under her parents' favoritism. She didn't know exactly how she'd strike back, but she felt the storm building inside her. It was Mrs. Keller, her English teacher, who placed the first weapon into her hands. "Emily," Mrs. Keller said one afternoon, pulling her aside after class. The sharp-eyed teacher wore her silver hair swept into a bun, glasses perched on her nose, and a look of determination Emily had always admired. "I submitted your last poem, without asking, forgive me, to the Boston Spoken Word Laureate program, and they've invited you to audition." Emily froze. The words felt too heavy to carry. Audition? Like, in front of people? "In front of some of the best in the field," Mrs. Keller explained. "If you get through, you'll go on to New York for the National Festival. It's the kind of stage people wait years for. And you, Emily, you're ready now." For a moment, Emily's breath caught in her throat. She imagined herself under the blinding stage lights, not in a dusty school auditorium, but in front of hundreds, maybe thousands, a place where her parents couldn't ignore her even if they tried. The fire inside her sharpened. "When is it?" she asked, her voice steady. 2 weeks, Mrs. Keller said with a smile. "And Emily, don't waste this. You've been underestimated long enough. Prove them wrong." That night, Emily locked her door and wrote until dawn. Words spilled like a flame licking through paper. Poems about being unseen, about invisibility, about screaming in silence. But beneath them all thrummed another theme: revenge. Not sudden, not cruel. A revenge built from undeniable brilliance. The audition loomed like a thundercloud. Emily rehearsed in secret, whispering lines in her room, pacing in front of her mirror until her voice carried the rhythm she demanded. She studied performance videos online, analyzing every gesture, every pause. Meanwhile, the household continued its normal rituals of Jason worship. Her parents spoke of his upcoming baseball camp nonstop, proudly telling relatives about his unmatched potential. Her existence melted into wallpaper again. But inside, she repeated her silent vow: "Soon they will see me." Jason was the first to notice her change. One late night, he cracked her bedroom door open. "Em." She looked up from her notebook, startled. "What do you want?" Jason shuffled nervously. "I found this flyer in your bag. About the audition. Why didn't you tell anyone?" "Because it doesn't matter," she snapped, then softened when she saw the discomfort in his face.
For all her resentment, Jason was not her enemy. He was just the golden child, orbiting praise he hadn't asked for. "You're really good, Emily," Jason said quietly. "I know, Mom and Dad, they don't notice stuff, but I do. I've read your poems when you leave them around. They're powerful." The words lingered, so unfamiliar coming from someone in her family that she almost didn't know how to respond. "Thanks," she muttered, unsure if she meant it. Jason hesitated, then added, "If you get in, will you let me come watch?" Her heart tugged in confusion. Jason's face was earnest, not smug. For the first time, she saw the shadow he lived under too, constantly forced to perform, constantly praised without pause, whether he wanted it or not. "Yes," she said, finally, surprising herself. "But don't tell them. Not yet." Jason nodded. When the audition day arrived, Emily felt both terror and exhilaration simmering in her veins. Standing backstage in Boston's old, echoing auditorium, she clutched her notebook until her knuckles turned pale. Performers before her spilled words filled with fire and heartbreak, their voices pulsing through the air. Then someone called her name. Emily stepped forward, faced the room, and for the first time, let the storm inside her loose. Her voice shook at first, but then found its rhythm. Hard, cutting, alive. She spoke of walls built within families, of invisible daughters drowned by golden sons, of the hunger to be seen. Her words struck like sparks, igniting the silence with recognition. When she finished, the auditorium didn't just clap, they roared. Later, when the judges announced she had been selected for New York, Emily blinked back tears in the bathroom mirror. Not because her parents would finally have to see her, but because for the first time in her life, she had chosen herself. Yet the thought simmered underneath. This was only the beginning.
The train hummed beneath Emily's feet as Boston blurred away into countryside and then into the towering skyline of New York. She sat nervously clutching her notebook to her chest, her ticket folded neatly inside the front cover. Jason sat beside her, fidgeting with his phone. He had insisted on coming, even sneaking out on the pretense of staying at a friend's house. Emily worried slightly that their parents would discover where he had gone, but somewhere deep inside, she wanted them to. She wanted them to realize that the Golden Boy had chosen to witness her. The National Spoken Word Festival was unlike anything she had ever seen. Posters with bold faces of poets hung across Lincoln Center's tall marble walls. Groups of performers rehearsed on staircases, their voices booming and echoing across courtyards. Emily felt like she had walked into another universe, where words were treated like weapons. Jason's eyes were wide. "Emily, this is huge." "It's bigger than baseball camp," Emily murmured, and for the first time, he laughed. Genuinely. No rivalry, no bitterness. That night in the cramped hotel room donated by the program, Emily rehearsed in front of Jason. She performed her newest piece, one that directly mirrored her life, a poem about a girl silenced so long that when she finally spoke, her voice cracked the walls her family built. Jason clapped, grinning nervously. "They're going to love it. Even Mom and Dad wouldn't be able to ignore it." Something shifted in Emily at those words. Even Mom and Dad. That became her fuel. She didn't just want to impress strangers anymore. She wanted her parents to look at her under the stage lights and feel the weight of their neglect in front of hundreds, no, thousands of witnesses. The idea planted itself like a seed in her chest. The first round of the festival crackled with energy. Emily was nervous but sharp, her words cutting with precision. She advanced effortlessly to the semifinals. Judges praised her clarity, the restraint in her anger, the originality of her metaphor. By the second day, murmurs of her name spread among the crowd.
But late that night, when Jason was asleep, Emily sat near the window and thought deeper. Winning wasn't enough. Winning would be a medal tucked into a drawer, a story she might tell 10 years later. That wouldn't punish them. She wanted more. What if she invited them, her parents, to the final round? What if in front of the screaming audience, in front of every set of judging eyes, she delivered a poem sharpened like a knife, aimed directly at the heart of their favoritism? The fantasy electrified her. She imagined Susan's face crumbling, Richard's jaw tightening. She imagined them, for once, unable to clap only for Jason. Her revenge wouldn't be harsh in the physical world, but on that stage, she would strip their silence naked. She picked up her notebook and scribbled into dawn. The piece that came out wasn't subtle. It wasn't masked. It was fire. It told the story of a daughter locked out of her own family, of a brother glorified while she disappeared, of parents who wore blindness like armor. At the end of the poem, her words declared, "When you finally clap for me, it won't be love. It will be guilt, echoing too late." Emily closed the notebook, trembling. She knew this plan carried risk. If her parents didn't come, they wouldn't hear it. If they did, it would expose the darkness she had carried for years. She could humiliate them. She could finally break through. The next morning, she sent them an email. Subject: "Come see me for once." She kept it brief. "I'm in the finals at the National Spoken Word Festival, Lincoln Center, this Saturday night. Jason is already here. You should be too. If you've ever cared, don't miss it. Emily." She hovered before hitting send, then pressed the button with a hard click. Jason woke up minutes later, yawning. "What are you doing?" "I'm making sure they see me," Emily said flatly. Jason looked uneasy but didn't argue. He only nodded slowly. Somewhere deep down, he might have understood that this wasn't just about winning a festival. It was war. Coming in next installment, Emily reaches the finals, her parents arrive reluctantly, and she unleashes her poem as a weapon of revenge before the entire auditorium. The night of the finals was wrapped in electric anticipation. The massive concert hall glowed with golden light spilling over hundreds of occupied seats, balconies stacked with eager faces. The hum of conversations blended into a living heartbeat. Emily stood backstage, her palms slick, eyes fixed on the slit of curtain that showed the ocean of strangers before her. But she wasn't hoping for strangers. She was hunting for two specific faces. Jason paced nearby, glancing through the crowd. "Do you think they'll even come?" he whispered. Emily's throat was dry. But then she saw them.
Susan, with her perfectly brushed blonde hair, clutching her purse tightly, and Richard in his usual stiff blazer, both sitting stiff-backed among the audience. Their expressions were unreadable, but they were there. They had come. A surge of adrenaline hit Emily so hard her knees nearly buckled. "Good," she thought. "Now you'll finally listen." The other finalists performed brilliantly. Slam poets with voices like thunder, lyrical narrators who made entire rows of people cry. But Emily wasn't intimidated. She wasn't just another competitor. She had turned this moment into a weapon, honed over years. When her name was called, she walked onto the stage, the microphone standing solitary in the spotlight. The audience clapped politely, curious. She felt the familiar sting of invisibility, but that lasted only until she opened her mouth. Her voice cut through the silence like a blade. "You ask why some children scream silently while others are drowned in applause." Gasps rippled in the audience. The first lines were sharp, unapologetic, and instantly personal. She drew them deeper, telling the story of a house divided,
Not by divorce, not by tragedy, but by favoritism so powerful it erased a daughter's existence. She painted Jason as the chosen son, every step mirrored in clapping hands, each mistake rebranded as brilliance. And then she painted herself as the ghost at the dinner table, a shadow no one turned toward. Jason sat frozen in the audience, his lips parted, torn between pride and guilt. Susan and Richard shifted uncomfortably, exchanging nervous glances. A couple of people in the audience glanced at them, sharp realization flickering on their faces. And then Emily reached the crescendo. I am not invisible anymore. I burn brighter than all your blindfolds. And when your applause finally rises for me tonight, remember, you are not clapping for your daughter. You are clapping for the shame you tried to bury. The silence that followed was suffocating. Emily stood, chest heaving, tears glistening in her eyes, daring the hall to breathe. And then it hit. The audience erupted, clapping, shouting, stomping, a standing ovation that shook the air like thunder. Emily stood, drinking it in. Not the applause itself, but the image of her parents forced to join it. She scanned the crowd. Richard's jaw was tight, his hands clapping slowly, mechanically. Susan's face burned red as she joined reluctantly, her eyes wet not from pride, but from humiliation. Everyone around them clapped wildly, trapping them in a storm they could not escape. Emily smiled, the first genuine smile she had felt in years. The standing ovation lasted minutes, and even when Emily walked off stage, people stopped her to shake her hand, to tell her how much they related, how powerful her confession had been. She thanked them with grace, but in deep inside, she wasn't thinking of them. She was thinking of the two people sitting stiff in the audience, finally incapable of ignoring her. Backstage, Jason found her first. His eyes glistened with tears. Emily, that was... I meant every word. I know. And they know too. Indeed, when she emerged from the performer's corridor later, her parents were waiting in the lobby, out of place among cheering strangers. Susan started first, her voice brittle. Emily, that poem, that wasn't... It was the truth. And the fact that you're embarrassed right now tells me you finally heard it. Richard swallowed hard, his usual composure cracking. We didn't... You did. Emily interrupted again. Her eyes were hard, burning with years of restraint now breaking apart. You ignored me. For years. And now everyone here knows it. That shame you feel? Good. Sit with it. Susan's lips trembled. For a second, she looked ready to argue, but then her gaze flicked away. She had no counter. Jason stood awkwardly between them, understanding that something irreversible had shifted. Emily wasn't the quieter sister anymore. She wasn't background noise. She had made herself undeniable. The festival crowned Emily one of the winners, and her name was announced across literary websites soon after. But the biggest victory wasn't the title, it was the silence of her parents on the train ride back, their faces pale, their reputations in tatters, in their own daughter's eyes. Emily stared out the window, notebook on her lap, and thought, this is only the beginning. I'll build myself higher, louder, brighter, until the world forgets I was ever invisible at all. And yet, buried beneath her satisfaction, another thought echoed too. Revenge tastes sweet, but it also makes you hungry for more. Recognition came faster than Emily expected. Within weeks of the festival, clips of her performance circulated online. Invisible Daughters was what strangers began calling it, And soon podcasts invited her to talk, newspaper columns quoted her lines, and high school students across the country posted shaky videos of themselves performing her poem as a tribute.
For once, her name didn't need her parents' household to exist. It was out there, undeniable. And the power of that, the control, went straight to her spine, like lightning. At home, this silence was heavy. Richard avoided conversation altogether, retreating into longer work hours at the office. Susan threw herself into community charity projects, plastering smiles for neighbors who whispered, "Did you hear what Emily's girl did?" Jason was the only one who engaged. He stuck close to Emily now, skipping baseball practices to help edit her new pieces, recording samples on his phone, even offering feedback she hadn't realized she needed. But Emily noticed the way his relationship with their parents soured in the process. One evening, Susan snapped at him across the dinner table. "Jason, you cannot keep skipping practices. The coach called today." Jason stabbed his fork into his food, not looking up. "Maybe I don't want to play anymore." The words froze the entire room. Richard's hands stopped halfway to his fork. Susan blinked in disbelief. "Not play? Jason, baseball is your future. Don't be absurd." "It was your future for me," he muttered, "not mine." Emily's heart swelled, proud, but also uneasy. She had expected her own revenge to sting her parents. She hadn't expected Jason to start revolting too. Richard's voice was sharp. "You've worked too hard to throw it away." Jason slammed his fork down. "Worked too hard for what? For you two to parade me around while you ignored Emily? I was just your trophy, wasn't I? I'm sick of it." The room erupted into silence. Emily watched as their parents' faces crumbled, the golden image of Jason slipping right out of their hands. She should have smiled. This was what she wanted, wasn't it? But instead, she felt a strange hollowness creep in. Taking away their son from their control, was that justice? Or was she turning Jason into another piece of her revenge? Still, when Jason stormed upstairs, slamming his door, she caught herself whispering into her food, "Good. Now they'll know what being invisible feels like." But later that night, as she worked on her next piece, Houses That Choose Sons Over Daughters, her pen paused. She realized she wasn't writing to heal anymore. She was writing to wound, and there was no bottom to that hunger. The backlash from her parents didn't take long. One Sunday morning, Susan cornered Emmy in the kitchen. Her mother's polite mask had slipped entirely now. Her voice was flat and exhausted. "Emily, this has to stop. You've embarrassed this family enough." Emily turned slowly. "Embarrassed? By telling the truth?" "You've poisoned Jason against us. Do you know what kind of reputation we have in this town? What people are saying about us? He's skipping practices, refusing to talk to his coach. And you've turned him into your little soldier." Emily leaned against the counter, arms folded. For once, she wasn't trembling in fear under her mother's authority. Instead, she spoke calmly. "You did that. Years of worshiping him, years of ignoring me, you broke him just like you tried to break me. Don't blame me for shining a flashlight on what you built." Richard entered then, his tie loose, face pale. His words were slow, deliberate. "You're famous now, Emily. Congratulations. But this family's problems don't belong in the public eye. You think you've won something? All you've done is air dirty laundry. Dirty laundry doesn't smell less because you hide it in the basket. It rots. I gave it air. I gave it voice." The showdown dragged into silence. For the first time in Emily's life, she saw something breaking in her parents' eyes. Not anger this time, not dismissal, but fear. Fear of losing control. And strangely, it filled her with both triumph and unease. Jason appeared from the staircase, glaring down. "You can't silence her anymore, and you can't silence me either." Emily turned toward him startled. Jason, who once absorbed their praise quietly, was now openly aligning with her. He placed a hand on her shoulder, standing taller than ever. Richard's face hardened, but Susan crumpled against the counter, burying her face in her hands.
For the first time, the family's foundation cracked wide open, and Emily realized she was holding the hammer. But even as power surged through her veins, so did a darker thought. What happens when revenge is all that defines me? Emily's rise from local talent to national voice was rapid. Invitations poured in. Guest appearances at universities, slam poetry events across the country, feature spots on podcasts about art and family dynamics. She had become a symbol for the unheard, a daughter whose words clawed through silence and reshaped the air.
But each new performance became sharper, more dangerous. Her words were no longer just poetic truths. They became confessions carved to cut. She mentioned her parents by name once, and the internet devoured it. Clips bounced across social media with captions like, "Emily Johnson burns her family with the truth." Richard and Susan's world collapsed in tandem. Church acquaintances turned cold. Neighbors whispered behind drawn curtains. Some parents at Jason's school looked at Susan with pity, others with quiet scorn. The Johnsons were no longer the model household. They were the case study of favoritism gone wrong. Jason, meanwhile, had become an echo of his sister's rebellion. He publicly quit baseball, announcing online that he was done being the mascot of other people's dreams. His small post went viral thanks to Emily's fans, who applauded his stand. Suddenly, both children were voices of resistance, and their parents were faceless villains in their story. But one evening, Richard made a last attempt. He waited for Emily in the kitchen, his hands clenching a coffee mug. His voice was weary but controlled. "You've made your point, Emily. Everyone hears you now. But it's time to stop. Drop this crusade. You'll ruin our name completely." Emily slid her notebook onto the counter and stared him down. "Our name means nothing to me. It never protected me. Why should I protect it?" Susan entered then, her voice shaking. "You're destroying us, this whole family." "No," Emily interrupted. "I didn't destroy anything. I just showed the cracks you worked so hard to cover. If those cracks swallow you whole, that's not my fault. That's justice." Jason came down the stairs, leaning on the rail. "I'm with her," he said simply. The words hit like another hammer blow, and in that moment, Emily felt it. Her parents didn't just lose their control, they had lost both of their children. It wasn't just revenge anymore, it was annihilation. The invitation came like destiny. Emily was asked to perform at a nationally televised spoken word gala in Washington, D.C., broadcast across the country. Millions of viewers, the kind of platform she had dreamed of and dreaded all at once. Emily knew what this meant. This would not just be an artistic triumph. This would be her final strike. As the night of the gala arrived, tension hung heavy. Jason accompanied her as moral support, her phone buzzing with encouragement from online fans. Her parents, however, received a private invitation she had sent herself. Brief, sharp, deliberate. "Come watch me destroy you." She doubted they would come, but they did. They sat stiff, pale, surrounded by strangers in the glittering auditorium. When Emily took the stage, the lights blooming across her face, she delivered her final poem. Not subtle, not masked in metaphor. She narrated the life of a daughter erased, parents who televised their son but muted their daughter, favoritism that became abuse by silence. She used their names without hesitation this time, Richard and Susan Johnson, turning the crowd into witnesses and jury. She was born into a house with two parents, but she grew up childless because they had eyes only for the boy who mirrored them. So she carved herself from their absence, turned neglect into fire, until the stage gave her what family would not. Every word was a weapon stripped of mercy. By the end, her parents were frozen statues in the crowd. The audience roared ovation, but the camera cut just briefly to the pale faces of Richard and Susan Johnson, immortalizing their humiliation in a moment that would burn online forever after airing. Emily bowed, heart steady. She wasn't trembling anymore. She wasn't wondering if they were proud. Pride wasn't what she wanted. She wanted them crushed under the weight of her words. Backstage, Jason hugged her fiercely. "You did it. You burned them alive in front of the world." "Yes," Emily's eyes gleamed, steady and merciless. "And I don't regret it."
Outside, reporters crowded, eager to interview the daughter who refused invisibility. Emily smiled for the cameras. Her parents slipped away through a side exit, too ashamed to face the press. For the first time in her life, Emily didn't care where they went or if she ever saw them again. She had cut the cord, lit the match, and watched their pedestal burn.
She was free. The Washington performance went viral overnight. Clips of Emily's final poem, raw, merciless, unforgettable, circulated on every major outlet. For weeks, magazine covers splashed her image across glossy pages. Commentators called her the voice of invisible children, the girl who turned her family's silence into a national mirror. But back home in Boston, silence reigned. Richard and Susan withdrew almost completely from public life. No neighborhood barbecues, no community events. Students in Jason's school hallways whispered about how their parents had been the ones Emily destroyed. Respectable appearances were gone. Emily, meanwhile, traveled nonstop for performances. Her calendar was filled, her audience growing. She stood before thousands, flying city to city, always delivering her truth. Each time she spoke, she felt the heat of power settling deeper into her chest. And yet, when she finally returned home, her old bedroom felt cavernous. The old cluttered walls seemed bare, almost foreign. Her notebooks lined the desk like grave markers. She realized she hadn't written for herself in months, only for others, only to keep extracting vengeance. Jason knocked softly on her door. He looked older now, taller, his eyes sharper. "You've done it, Emily. They'll never recover. Everyone knows the truth." "Yes," she said quietly. Jason studied her. "But do you feel better?" Emily hesitated. She wanted to say yes, that humiliation had been enough, but something inside her whispered otherwise. "I feel free," she admitted, "but sometimes empty, too." Jason nodded slowly. "You tore them down, but what are you going to build now?" His words echoed in her mind long after he left. Revenge had been her oxygen. Now, with the fire burned out, what was left to breathe? Weeks later, Emily received another invitation, this time to give the keynote address at a national youth forum in Chicago. Thousands of students were expected, as well as educators, parents, entire families sitting together to listen. Emily understood the weight of it. This wasn't a chance to wound. This was a chance to seed something lasting. On the flight there, she carried not her old poems, but a new notebook, blank pages waiting. Jason sat beside her, headphones in, his quiet rebellion still burning in the distance of his gaze. When she stepped onto the forum stage, the applause was deafening, but Emily didn't smile. She looked out at the crowd, at the parents sitting beside their children, and thought of Richard and Susan. Her voice rang out clear. "I stood here once before, telling the world how my parents forgot me. That truth still stands, and it needed to be said. But tonight, I want to tell every child sitting quietly, every kid who feels invisible, don't wait for your family to see you. Make yourself impossible not to see. Write it, shout it, sing it, build it, until even silence cannot bury you." The audience roared with applause. Not pity, not voyeurism, but recognition. Emily felt the difference. For the first time, her words weren't shackled to revenge. They were building something new. Backstage later, Jason hugged her. He said, "Maybe it's over now." Emily leaned back, thoughtful. "It's never really over. Scars don't fade. But scars aren't the end either. They're proof you survived, and proof you fought back." She walked off into the night, the city lights glimmering like countless stages waiting for her voice. Whatever family she lost in fire, she had gained something greater. Herself. Not invisible, not forgotten. Unbreakable. And this time, she didn't look back.